The moment when an empath ceases to be a victim and becomes a mirror is not merely a shift of behavior, but a profound initiation into the hidden architecture of the psyche. You see, the empath lives much of life absorbed in the emotions of others, pours to every whisper of pain, every unspoken sorrow, every trembling desire that floats in the atmosphere of the human collective. It is as though their very skin is made of a thin veil, transparent and vulnerable, allowing the tides of the unconscious to wash through them without resistance. And yet this transparency, this ability to feel what others cannot feel, is a double-edged gift, for as long as the empath remains unconscious of their own depth, they are not the master of this gift, but the servant of it. And in that servitude, they become victim to forces greater than they can name. I must tell you that the victimhood of the empath is not weakness in the ordinary sense. It is not a lack of intelligence, nor even a lack of strength. It is rather a misalignment, a refusal to acknowledge that what they call their gift is also their curse. That what they sense in others is, in truth, an echo of their own buried shadows. You see, when you feel someone else's pain so acutely, you are not merely encountering the other, you are encountering yourself through them. The empath does not yet realize this. They imagine they are healers, saviors, saints, wandering through the world to absorb the suffering of mankind. But unconsciously they are feeding upon it. Just as others feed upon them, they are locked in a dance where they bleed for others in order to avoid their own blood. This is the secret tragedy of the empath as victim. They cannot distinguish the boundary between the self and the other, between projection and reality, between compassion and self-erasure. The turning point comes when the empath begins to recognize the archetype at work within them. The archetype is not chosen, it seizes you. And the archetype of the wounded healer has always stalked those who feel too much. Think of Chiron in the centaur, pierced by a wound that never heals. And yet the source of his wisdom as a healer, the empath, carries this same destiny. They wander with an unhealed wound, hoping that in healing others, they might indirectly heal themselves. But in truth, they become enslaved because the unconscious refuses to be tricked. No amount of external healing replaces the inner descent into the cavern of one's own pain until the empath recognizes that the sorrow they absorb is a mirror of their own soul. They remain chained to the archetype in its destructive form. It is here that the image of the mirror emerges. To become a mirror is to cease absorbing and to begin reflecting. The mirror does not deny what stands before it, nor does it consume it. It simply reveals. When the empath awakens, they realize that their gift was never to carry another suffering, but to reveal it to them, to hold up a reflection so precise, so luminous, that the other cannot hide from themselves. But such reflection requires that the empath stand rooted in their own center, in their own shadow, no longer porous and unguarded, but firm and radiant. The mirror is clarity. The victim is confusion. To become a mirror, the empath must journey into their own darkness, confront the archetypes that move within them, and claim the authority of their own inner self. The process of transformation is painful. For the empath who has lived a life defined by pleasing others, soothing others, and rescuing others, to suddenly withdraw and say, I will not carry your pain anymore, feels like betrayal. It feels as though they are abandoning love, but what is abandoned is not love, it is codependency, illusion, and projection. Love without boundaries is not love, it is dissolution. To love another is not to merge with their darkness, but to stand before them as a mirror in which they may see their own truth. This is why the empath who becomes a mirror is often hated, rejected, accused of cruelty. For when you no longer absorb the poison, the one who depended on you to drink it will rage at you. Yet it is in this rage that they begin, perhaps for the first time, to face themselves. The psyche speaks in symbols, and so let us turn to the dream world, where these truths are written in the language of the unconscious. Imagine a dream in which you are walking through a forest. Each tree whispers sorrow, each stream carries grief, and as you move, you feel the weight of the entire forest pressing into your chest. This is the empath's life before awakening. An endless forest of other people's emotions, carried as though they were your own. But then imagine you come to a lake, and when you kneel to drink, the water does not enter you. Instead, it shows you your reflection. You see not the forest, not the others, but your own face, luminous and shadowed at once. This is the moment of becoming a mirror, when you realize that what you have absorbed all along was simply the unconscious demanding that you see yourself, but the mirror is not passive. It is not a lifeless piece of glass. In the psychology of symbols, the mirror is alive. It transforms what it reflects. When you stand before a true mirror, you are compelled to confront the image without escape. This is why, in myth, the mirror has always been dangerous. Perseus used the mirror-like shield to slay Medusa, for to look directly was death. The empath, as mirror, is such a shield. They reflect the Medusa of another's shadow, allowing the other to see without being consumed. Yet this power only emerges when the empath has already faced their own Medusa within. If they have not, the mirror cracks and they fall back into victimhood. Do you see how delicate this balance is? To be a victim is to be devoured by the archetype. To be a mirror is to embody the archetype consciously. The empath must undergo the alchemical transformation, the nigredo, the blackening, in which they confront the unbearable truth, that their sensitivity has been a way of escaping their own confrontation with the self. Only when they enter the blackness willingly, without resistance, do they emerge with the power of the mirror. The victim cries, "Why am I always hurt?" The mirror says, "Look, this is who you are, and this is who I am. We are separate. We are whole." And here arises the mystery of projection. You see, much of what the empath experiences as external suffering is, in fact, projection from their own unconscious. They attract wounded souls because they themselves are wounded. They sense abandonment because they have not embraced the abandoned child within. They suffer manipulation because they manipulate themselves into silence. To become a mirror is to withdraw these projections, to see the wound within and no longer seek its healing outside. Then, when the wounded approach, the empath does not collapse into them, but holds up the mirror, silently saying, "What you seek from me is what you must seek within yourself." And this is the birth of true individuation. For both the empath and the one reflected, the transition from victim to mirror is not a single moment but a series of moments, each like a wave crashing upon the shore. There are times when the empath believes they have escaped, only to find themselves again dissolved in the ocean of others' feelings. But each return is a lesson, each collapse a reminder. Slowly they learn to anchor themselves in the self, that central archetype of wholeness which holds together the opposites. The self does not reject compassion, but neither does it drown in it. The self loves, but it also sets boundaries. The self is both the wounded and the healer, both the victim and the mirror, united in a transcendent paradox. When the empath touches the self, they cease being defined by others and begin radiating their own inner truth. This radiance is what transforms their presence from victimhood into reflection. The danger, of course, is inflation. Once the empath discovers the power of the mirror, they may imagine themselves as omnipotent, as judges of others' souls, but the true mirror does not judge, it simply reveals. The moment the empath begins to believe they are superior, they fall again into shadow. For superiority is merely another mask of insecurity. The mirror remains humble, for it knows that what it reflects is not its own creation, but the eternal dance of psyche. To be a mirror is not to control, but to witness. It is the quiet power of presence, the refusal to be manipulated, the clarity of one who has seen their own shadow and therefore cannot be deceived by another's. This is why when the empath becomes a mirror, they radiate a kind of stillness. The victim radiates turmoil, attracting predators and parasites who feed on confusion. The mirror radiates calm, attracting those who are ready to see. You may notice this in your own life. When you cease absorbing, some people vanish. They were never with you, they were only with the nourishment they could take. Others will remain uneasy at first, but slowly transformed by the reflection you hold. And in this transformation, you too are transformed, for as you reveal others to themselves, you see yourself more clearly. The mirror is always two-way. It is not only they who face their shadow, but you as well. When the empath begins to awaken, the psyche shakes violently. For the old identity, as victim clings desperately to survival. You may feel within yourself the pull of two worlds, the familiar world, in which you were defined by the sorrows of others, and the unknown world in which you begin to stand apart, radiant in your own center. This tension is what Jung described as the opposites within the psyche, struggling towards synthesis. The old world whispers, if you do not carry them, you are heartless. The new world whispers, if you carry them, you will never live. And in the space between these two whispers, the soul is stretched, sometimes to the point of despair. Yet despair is not the enemy here, it is the crucible. The empaths cannot be reborn without dying first to their old identity. In my work with patients, I often observed that the unconscious speaks most loudly at the threshold of transformation. Dreams become darker, more chaotic, filled with figures that accuse, shame, or seduce. These figures are the guardians of the threshold. For the empath, Such dreams may take the form of drowning in a flood, being devoured by an endless crowd, or carrying a wounded child who never heals. These images are not random, they are revelations. They show the psyche's recognition that the old pattern is unsustainable. The dream insists, you cannot carry forever what is not yours, but the dream also hints at what lies beyond. If you endure the flood, if you refuse to drop the child, if you dare to stand still in the midst of the crowd, something shifts. A hidden figure appears, a wise old man, a luminous woman, a radiant flame in the dark. These are archetypes of the self breaking through the fog of victimhood, signaling that the transformation into mirror has begun, and yet to become a mirror is not to become cold or indifferent. Many fear that if they cease to absorb, they will lose compassion. But the opposite is true. Only when you are no longer drowning in another's pain can you truly love them. Compassion that consumes you is not compassion but fusion. True compassion is the capacity to stand beside another, to see their suffering clearly, and to honor their journey without making it your own. This is what the mirror embodies. It does not absorb your tears, but it shows you your face streaked with them. It does not swallow your rage, but it reflects your eyes blazing with it. It does not fix you, but it compels you to see yourself so clearly that you can no longer escape the truth. This is the most radical form of love, love that reveals rather than rescues. The danger of rescuing lies in the archetype of the savior. Many empaths secretly believe they are chosen to heal others, and this belief intoxicates them. It flatters the ego while hiding the deeper wound. But the savior archetype has a shadow, and its shadow is martyrdom. The savior who heals without boundaries becomes the martyr who dies for the ungrateful masses. This is not wholeness, it is self-destruction. To become a mirror is to transcend both savior and martyr, to realize that you are not here to save anyone, nor to be sacrificed by anyone, but to embody the truth of your own self so fully that others are forced to see themselves in this. Paradoxically, healing may occur, but it is no longer your responsibility. The mirror heals by presence, not by sacrifice. Let me tell you a story, drawn not from myth, but from the lived texture of the psyche. Imagine a woman who has always been the emotional anchor of her family. As a child, she comforted her mother during storms of despair. She smoothed over the silences of her father. She carried the burdens of her siblings. As an adult, she attracted lovers who demanded her energy, friends who confided in her endlessly, colleagues who leaned on her for support. She prided herself on being needed, but secretly she was exhausted, hollow, on the verge of collapse. One day, in therapy, she dreamt of a mirror shattering. She woke with terror. What did it mean? She thought it meant her identity was breaking apart, that she was losing the only self she had ever known. But over time, she realized the dream was not about destruction, it was about rebirth. The shattering of the false mirror, the one that distorted and absorbed, so that the true mirror could emerge. In time, she learned to stand before her family and say, I cannot carry this for you anymore. They raged, they accused, they withdrew, but slowly, one by one, they began to face their own shadows. And she, for the first time, began to live. This is the path of the empath, becoming a mirror. To live as a mirror is to embody individuation. Individuation is not selfishness. It is the recognition that your soul has its own destiny, its own path toward wholeness, and you betray that destiny when you dissolve into the lives of others. The empath often fears individuation because it feels like separation. But individuation is not isolation. It is the deepest connection. For only when you are whole within yourself can you truly meet another as they are. The mirror does not stand apart from the world. It reflects the world in its wholeness. To individuate is to become that mirror, luminous with the totality of your being, able to reflect not only light, but also shadow, without flinching. And here we must speak of shadow, for the empath's greatest struggle lies here. The shadow is all that we refuse to see in ourselves. For the empath, the shadow often contains anger, selfishness, desire for power, and even cruelty, because the empath identifies as gentle, giving, and compassionate. These qualities are repressed, buried in the unconscious. But repression does not dissolve them. It merely projects them onto others. Thus the empath attracts abusers, manipulators, narcissists, not by accident, but because these figures embody what the empath refuses to acknowledge within. To become a mirror, the empath must turn inward and face these forbidden qualities. They must recognize, yes, I too am capable of rage. I too am capable of manipulation. I too am capable of cruelty. Only when these truths are owned consciously do they cease to control from the shadows. Then, when the manipulator appears, the empath does not collapse, for they have already confronted the manipulator within. The mirror holds firm because it has integrated the darkness it once denied. This confrontation with shadow is terrifying, for it dismantles the empath's self-image as purely good, but without it, the empath remains trapped in victimhood, forever hunted by the shadows they refuse to own. To stand before your own shadow and say, "You are mine, and I will not reject you," is the most radical act of freedom. And from that freedom arises the capacity to reflect others without being ensnared by them. For you cannot be deceived by what you have already met in yourself. The mirror is invulnerable not because it is impenetrable, but because it has nothing to hide. The transition then is alchemical. First comes the nigredo, the blackening, where the empath confronts the despair of victimhood. Then the albedo, the whitening, where the mirror begins to shine with clarity. Finally, the rubedo, the reddening, where the empath becomes fully integrated, radiant with the wholeness of the self. This alchemy is not a theory. It is a lived process, unfolding in the crucible of life, in relationships, in dreams, in the subtle movements of the soul, and it is never complete, for individuation is a lifelong journey. Even the mirror must polish itself again and again, lest it grow clouded by projection once more. Perhaps you feel within you the stirring of this transformation. Perhaps you sense that you are tired of carrying, tired of rescuing, tired of dissolving into others, Perhaps you are ready to become a mirror. If so, know that the path will demand everything of you. You will lose people who depended on your victimhood. You will face your own shadow with trembling hands. You will be accused, misunderstood, even hated. But beyond all this lies a freedom so profound that words can scarcely contain it. The freedom of standing in your own self, luminous and whole, reflecting the world as it is, without losing yourself within it. This is the freedom of the mirror, and it is the destiny of the empath who awakens. You may wonder why the empath clings so fiercely to victimhood, even when it brings only exhaustion and despair. The answer lies in the unconscious contract they have made with life from early childhood. The empath often discovers that to survive, they must attune themselves to the moods of others, a volatile parent, a withdrawn caregiver, a chaotic household. These conditions birth the empath. They learn before they have words that safety comes not from expressing their own needs, but from anticipating and soothing the needs of others. Thus, the victim pattern is not chosen freely. It is imposed, imprinted upon the psyche like a brand, and to break free of it is to betray the very strategy that once ensured survival. That betrayal feels like death, for the child within still believes, if I stop absorbing, I will not be loved. If I stop rescuing, I will not be safe. It is here that the empath must reparent themselves, must turn inward, and offer to the abandoned child the love that was once sought outside. For only when the inner child is seen, held, and embraced, can the compulsion to absorb others dissolve. Imagine sitting before that child in a dream, watching their tear-streaked face, listening to their confession. I'm afraid that if I let go, no one will want me. What would you say to them? What would you give them to become a mirror? You must speak to this child not with words of dismissal, but with words of truth. You are wanted. You are loved. You are enough, even when you do not carry anyone else. This moment of inner embrace is the hidden initiation. Without it, the empath remains chained to the past, reliving endlessly the drama of rescuing and being devoured. And once this inner reconciliation begins, the world itself shifts. Those who once fed on your victimhood will resist, for they sense the withdrawal of their nourishment. They may grow louder, more demanding, more manipulative, but hold steady. The storm is only temporary. Their rage is the symptom of their confrontation with themselves, for the mirror you now hold allows them no place to hide. If they leave, let them. If they stay, let them face their reflection. Your task is not to manage their reaction, but to remain faithful to your own self. The temptation will be great to slip back into absorption, to soothe them once more, but every time you resist that temptation, your mirror becomes clearer, yourself more radiant, and over time, even the fiercest accuser may be transformed by the clarity you embody, though you may never see it with your own eyes. This transformation of the empath has profound implications for the collective, for we live in an age in which victimhood has become an epidemic, in which individuals and even entire societies define themselves by wounds, grievances, and the endless consumption of sympathy The empath as victim fits easily into this collective sickness, reinforcing it by carrying the sorrows of others without resolution. But the empath as mirror disrupts the pattern. They become dangerous to the collective illusion, for they refuse to play the role of endless absorber. They insist instead that each person confront their own shadow. This is why such empaths are often rejected by the world, accused of cruelty or selfishness. Yet this rejection is proof of their power, for the world resists most fiercely the truth it most needs to see. The mirror is also a symbol of the self's eternal nature. When you look into a mirror, if you see an image that is both you and not you, both present and untouchable, this paradox is at the heart of individuation. To be a mirror is to live in that paradox, to be fully present in the world, reflecting it, yet untouched by it. The victim dissolves into the world, losing themselves in the tides of others. The mirror remains distinct, yet connected. This balance is the mystery of wholeness, not isolation, not fusion, but relationship rooted in the self. To achieve this is to taste the timeless, for the self is eternal, a spark of the divine within the psyche. Thus, when the empath becomes a mirror, they do not simply heal themselves, they embody the archetypal truth that wholeness is possible in a fragmented world. You may have noticed that when you begin to stand as a mirror, synchronicities occur. The world seems to conspire to show you reflections everywhere, dreams of glass, encounters with strangers who speak your hidden thoughts, sudden images of clarity arising in meditation. These are not accidents, they are the self communicating through the language of symbol, affirming that you are on the path of individuation. The mirror outside confirms the mirror within, and as you attend to these synchronicities, you realize that your life itself has become a reflection, a living mirror through which the unconscious speaks to the world. This is no longer victimhood, this is vocation. But remember, the mirror must remain clean. Projections clouded. When you project your unresolved shadow onto others, your reflection becomes distorted, and you fall again into confusion. This is why ongoing inner work is essential. Dreams must be attended to, symbols honored, the shadow faced again and again. The work never ends, but neither does the radiance. Each time you polish the mirror, you shine more brightly, and the world around you becomes clearer. And though you may never receive gratitude from those who face themselves in your reflection, the gratitude of the self is enough. For to live in alignment with the self is to know a peace that no external approval can provide. The empath as mirror embodies also the archetype of the alchemist. For what is alchemy but the art of transformation through reflection? The alchemist gazes upon the base metal and sees the gold hidden within. The empath as mirror gazes upon the broken soul and reflects back to them not only their wound, but also their potential for wholeness. This is not absorption but transmutation, and in the process, the empath too is transmuted, discovering the gold hidden within their own darkness. The victim gathers lead and is crushed by its weight. The mirror reveals the gold and is illumined by its glow. Think too of the myth of Narcissus, who fell in love with his own reflection in the water. Many interpret this as a tale of vanity, but there is a deeper meaning. Narcissus was not destroyed because he loved himself, but because he mistook the reflection for the self. The empath, as victim, falls into the same trap. They confuse the reflections of others with their own identity, but the mirror archetype corrects this error. It teaches, you are not the reflection, you are the one who reflects. To know this is liberation, for it ends the cycle of illusion and allows true relationship to begin. Thus, the empath who becomes a mirror does not abandon their gift, they refine it. They move from unconscious absorption to conscious reflection, from victimhood to individuation, from shadow to self. And this journey, though it feels solitary, is in fact the deepest service to the world, for the world does not need more victims. It needs mirrors, souls who reflect the truth so clearly that others can no longer hide from themselves. This is the hidden destiny of the empath, and it is unfolding now. Wherever courage triumphs over fear, wherever presence triumphs over absorption, wherever the self triumphs over shadow, when the empath finally embodies the mirror, they enter a stage of life that feels like stepping into a new atmosphere, a new vibration where the air itself has changed, no longer suffocated by the unending smoke of others' fires. They breathe with clarity, and each breath becomes an act of individuation. Yet, this clarity is not without consequence, for the mirror, though luminous, is a solitary instrument. To stand as a mirror is to accept that many will avoid your gaze, many will curse the reflection, and many will accuse you of cruelty for no longer carrying what was never yours. But solitude in this sense is not emptiness, it is fullness. It is the fullness of the self, a completeness that requires no constant feeding from the outside. In this solitude, the empath, who was once victim, finds for the first time a home in themselves, and then something extraordinary happens. When you no longer carry the world begins to reveal itself to you in new ways. You see patterns where before there was only noise. You recognize archetypes in every face. The wounded child, the tyrant king, the seductress, the trickster, the sage. You see these not as enemies, but as mirrors of the collective unconscious, playing out the eternal drama of humanity. And in seeing them, you are no longer ensnared. The narcissist approaches, and you see not a predator, but a reflection of a psyche starving for recognition. The manipulator speaks, and you hear not only the words, but the shadow whispering behind them. And in this seeing, you are free. You do not need to merge or to fight. You simply reflect, and the reflection itself becomes the most powerful force, for it reveals truth more cutting than any sword. This is the stage where synchronicity deepens. Life begins to speak to you in signs, not because the world has changed, but because you have, when you were a victim, you drowned in chaos, and chaos drowned out the voice of the self. As a mirror, you stand still, and in stillness, the self can speak. The right people appear at the right time, the right books fall into your hands, the right dreams deliver the symbols you need. This is not magic in the childish sense, but magic in the archetypal sense, the alignment of inner and outer worlds, the union of psyche and cosmos. Jung called this the mysterium conjunctionis, the sacred union, where the fragments of the soul align with the great order of being. The empath, as mirror, is invited into this mystery, for in embodying reflection, they have cleared the distortion that once blocked the vision. But beware, for every ascent has its danger. The mirror may become too fascinated with its own clarity, too enchanted with the power of reflection. In such moments, inflation lurks. You may begin to believe you are the arbiter of truth, the one who sees while others are blind. This is another mask of shadow, subtler, but just as dangerous. For the mirror is not the source of light, it merely reflects. The moment you forget this, the mirror clouds, and you fall again into confusion. Thus, humility is essential. Humility is the polish that keeps the mirror clear. To remain humble is to remember always that what you reflect is not yours, that you too are reflected in others, that you too are a work in progress, forever becoming. In this humility, the mirror retains its power without corruption. The empath, who has become a mirror, also begins to discover the joy of boundaries. What once felt like cruelty now feels like liberation. To say no is no longer a crime, but a prayer, a declaration of self. To walk away is not abandonment, but clarity. To refuse to absorb is not selfishness, but wisdom. Boundaries are not walls, they are frames, like the frame of a mirror. Without the frame, the mirror cannot exist. With the frame, the mirror shines, and in learning to hold boundaries, the empath realizes that they are not less compassionate, but more. For now, their compassion does not dissolve them, it empowers them. They can sit with another suffering without losing themselves. And in that presence, true healing becomes possible, and so the journey comes full circle. The empath who was once victim, drowning in the tides of others' pain, becomes the mirror, reflecting with clarity, standing in the wholeness of the self. But this is not an end, it is a beginning, for individuation is never complete, and the mirror must be tended to daily. Each encounter, each dream, each symbol is another opportunity to polish the glass, to clear the distortions, to deepen the reflection. And in this lifelong work, the empath becomes not only a mirror for others, but a mirror for the world itself, reflecting the eternal truths of psyche, shadow, and self. This is the sacred vocation of the empath, who awakens not to save, not to carry, not to dissolve, but to reflect, and in reflection, to illuminate the path for others without losing themselves in the darkness. So I say to you now, if you feel the weight of others pressing upon you, if you are tired of being consumed, if you long for freedom, dare to step into the mirror, dare to withdraw the projections, to face your shadow, to embrace the abandoned child within, dare to say no, to let go, to stand still in the clarity of your own self. It will feel like death, but it is rebirth. It will feel like loss, but it is liberation. And when you stand as a mirror, radiant and whole, you will discover that you were never here to be a victim. You were here to reflect. You were here to embody the truth that wholeness is possible, that shadow and light can coexist, that the self is stronger than any illusion. And in this discovery, you will no longer be merely empath, you will be alchemist, mirror, witness, and soul in alignment with the eternal. And so the sermon closes not with an ending, but with a reflection. Look within yourself now. Ask, am I still absorbing, or am I reflecting? Am I still a victim, or have I become a mirror? The answer will not be given in words, but in the quiet movements of your soul. Trust that movement, trust the self. For the moment an empath stops being a victim and becomes a mirror is the moment they step into the fullness of life itself.